ICQPodcast episode 306, Hamfest 2019. Well, hello fellow Amateur Radio enthusiasts and welcome to this episode 306 of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, recorded and completed just a few hours after Hamfest 2019. This episode is supported by Nugent, along with our monthly and subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M1MRB is joined by Chris, Mike 0 Tango Charlie Hotel, Ed, DD5 Lima Papa, and Frank, Kilo 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel, to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief. This episode's feature is our review of Hamfest 2019. Well, as we always say, it's our donors that keep us advert free on the show, and this episode we'd like to thank shortwave listener Nugent, who says, "Hi guys, just started studying to get my Irish licence and found your podcast very helpful. I've listened to a year's worth in the last month or so, and I'm giving you a year's worth of support. I'm starting season 6 episode 16 tonight while walking the dog. So Amory, I hope you continue enjoying the show, and you never know, some of the things we've spoken about in our feature from Hamfest 2019 might interest you in coming over to the UK to come to Hamfest next September." Well, so to keep the show advert free, all you need to do is do what Amory did and go to www.iccqpodcast.com/donate and say anything you send our way to show your value to the show helps us pay our running costs and say it keeps the show advert free. Well, now we're joined Martin, Chris, Ed and Frank to discuss the latest amateur radio news, including pirate DAB in Ireland and saltwater and plastic antennas. I hope you enjoy.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, hi guys, welcome to episode 306 of the ICQ Podcast and tonight's News Roundtable for this episode. We're a bit short on the ground tonight, but I'm sure the guys have got a lot to say about some of these subjects, so it should be very interesting. Tonight I'm joined by Mr. Chris Howard M0TCH.
Evening, Martin.
Evening, Chris. And we're going to be busy for the rest of the week on podcasting.
I think we are very busy, absolutely, yeah.
We'll tell them at the end, though, won't we? We also got Mr. Frank Howell K4FMH over there in Mississippi.
Hey, guys. Good to be with you tonight.
Yeah, good to have you, Frank. And also, offshore from the UK, we have Mr. Durrant DD5LP over there in Germany.
Evening, all.
Yeah, he still sounds like the old Bill. You do it to wind me up, don't you, Ed? But,
yep.
Yeah. Okay. First news story, the North Korean broadcaster Voice of Korea is testing DRM, that's Digital Radio Mondial, on amateur radio frequencies in the 80-meter band. You know, this is, once again, you just wonder why the Koreans have to create these little problems that they just go ahead and create them. But, Ed, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, just a bit of background in case any of the listeners don't know what DRM is, not to be mixed up with DMR. DRM, Digital Radio Mondial, is a way to transmit audio in a digital format on some of these big AM shortwave transmitters. The result is when it's received on a shortwave receiver with the required decoding is a quality of audio similar to what you get on an FM station or an FM receiver. So it's a way of putting out high quality audio over very long distances. It's used a lot in Africa, India and various large continents. And for some reason, the North Koreans are experimenting with it. Apparently, they have been experimenting with it for several years on and off. But for some reason, they decided to put it on 3560 kilohertz this time. And obviously, that's the amateur band where they shouldn't be. But I don't think anybody's going to go over the border and tell them that they shouldn't be doing it for a while. But yeah, it's I guess with it being on the 80-meter band, they're looking to cover probably just the Korean peninsula and not much further than that with the propagation like it is at the moment. But yeah, it's interesting that they're experimenting with it, but for their propaganda station. But Why do they even need that? Why don't they just use simple AM shortwave? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I said it in pre-show chat. North Korea just seems to me like the second child that's being naughty to be recognised by doing things that, the naughty child type thing, by going on the air in the amateur bands. That's going to get you publicity. They're just trying to, I think it's just try for help. What do you think, Frank?
Well, it reflects the lack of cooperation, political cooperation in the international sphere that some countries, in this case North Korea, simply does not have. And so then, therefore, unless there's a direct cost to them, they'll sort of do what they darn well please. The story in Radio World suggests that they bought the transmitter from a Chinese manufacturer, Beijing Broadcasting Equipment Factory, which has already apparently sold North Korea a number of shortwave transmitters back in 2011. So, we'll see where it goes. It might affect Japan in terms of amateur radio, depending upon how it goes and that sort of thing. So it's just not playing very well in the sandbox, is it?
No, not at all. Not at all. But we'll see. Chris, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, kind of what Ed was saying is I wonder why they've chosen DRM rather than AM. Obviously, there's millions and millions of AM receivers out there, which no doubt can receive on those frequencies, and yet probably not as many DRM. Although I don't know how, it's not something that in the UK we have DRM, we have an alternative digital system. But I'm wondering, I don't know how popular DRM is in other parts of the world, whether it's something that there are many, whether there's much uptake or not. But I suppose they are looking perhaps to the future when maybe digital modes become more popular. And clearly, like as Frank was saying, it's a political thing, and they want to get the message out about North Korea to the rest of the world. I think we know that it's a fairly restricted country. They don't like foreign media being picked up by local people in North Korea. Likewise, in the internet, I think is pretty much blocked. And obviously, if we ever get a station, an amateur radio station there, everyone wants to work them because obviously they're a very rare country to work. But yeah, it's interesting why they've chosen DRM as the standard for these transmissions. I think it says somewhere that this is just a test at the moment, so maybe they are just looking to the future.
Yeah, but they could have chosen somewhere outside the amateur bands. But never mind.
This is true, yeah. It's funny why they've chosen 80 meters, yeah.
To generate some traffic on podcasts like this, I assume, in news stations. Moving on, Bulgarian radio hams gain access to 6 meters. Quite a very small part of it. Chris, do you want to go first on this one?
I can do, yeah. So they've got just a sliver between 50.31 and 50.335 megahertz. So not a very wide portion. We did have a look at it, didn't we, earlier at the band plan, or certainly the UK band plan. That seems to be for digital operations. So I think we discussed earlier this might be for maybe FT8 for them to use that mode. So it's good that they've got some additional allocation, as it is. It's always good to get amateurs on the air. So we may be able to talk to some Bulgarian hams on 6 meters.
Yeah, well, the more on 6, the better. It's a lovely band. Frank, do you do much 6 meters at all?
Very sporadic, and with some other hams in the area who are big 6 meter fans. I do plan to put up what's called a squalo, kind of a short or chopped off Moxon antenna for 6 meters in my attic. That's on my to-do list. So I do have a real interest in it. I am intrigued on the digital part of this because, as we know, with the sunspot cycle, and I just read that we've had some period with absolutely zero sunspots, a very clear sun, as some of them call it. Digital modes are certainly much more attractive than certainly voice is. So I think this will be a good thing. It's temporary. We'll see how they're going to evaluate it. But I think we can help them out, particularly you guys closer to Bulgaria on 6 meters when there's an opening, try to work them.
Yeah, well, I managed to usually work into Bulgaria quite easy on about 10 watts in the middle of the summer. So, yeah, could certainly try that. Ed, you're even closer than I am. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, so you work into Bulgaria in the summer on not on 6 meters though, because they didn't have 6 meters, right? On 2 meters, no?
Sorry, I'm thinking that sort of way. I've certainly worked into Hungary quite regularly.
Okay. Yeah, of course, what we look for is sporadic E for 6 meters or 4 meters. And but this frequency range they've been given could be for Earth, Moon, Earth. However, I doubt that's likely because I suspect they're limited on the power they're allowed to run. It's almost certainly the article says it's for experimentation with new modes. So to me, that sounds like it's more like JT6 or JT8 and the JT modes anyway, and FT8, FT4, etc. And yeah, good luck to them. It's good that they've got. Even if it's only for a short period of time, that they've got access to 6 meters. Certainly swing the beam round their way when the conditions are better, and see what we can work.
Yeah, well, people who collect countries in different modes, there'll be another country on 6 meters for you, so that's a good one. Well, we talked about this one in the pre-show chat quite a length and shook our heads on this one, but there are pirates on DAB multiplexes taking part on the air in Ireland. And I was thinking this is going to be quite strange because my experience of Ireland and DAB is that there's only DAB around the Dublin area and around the Cork area. The rest of the country don't have DAB. But it just looks phenomenally difficult to get a license there. Frank, I know you don't have DAB over in your part of the world, but what do you think of this story?
Well, I think it's, being a sociologist, I see the part of it that they're rebelling and they want to use that particular mode, and it just takes a year or 5 months to get your application through, plus a sum of money. And when you get things backed up like that, people are going to take it in their own hands, usually, or at least some group of people who are doing that to kind of force the issue. And that seems to be the thing here. You guys in the UK, I just have to say Radio Caroline, and you have a good understanding of how that works.
Yes, certainly do. And from my experience of Ireland a few years ago, and hopefully it's improved, I really do hope it's improved, but in the very rural areas, people drive cars without driving licenses. Because there used to be, I don't know if it still is, something like a 4-year waiting list to do your test. There's a lot goes on in Ireland, so if people are going to drive around with no licenses, this is no surprise they're going to pirate all sorts of things. What's your thoughts, Chris?
I think it's again, it's similar, isn't it? I suppose to this story about North Korea. We've got people are using a very complicated, difficult technology and to do pirate radio essentially. So I was wondering why I'm assuming it's a lot more difficult to pirate a DAB station than it is to pirate an ordinary FM or AM station. So it's interesting they're doing it. It talks about the cost of doing it if you want to get a pucker license. It's obviously a significant amount of money and it takes a long time. And as Frank was saying, I suppose this part of the world has got a history of pirate radio stations and starting off as kind of naughty stations, and then eventually becoming legitimate. We know there's various stations around, not just Radio Caroline, but also various ones around London that started off as pirates and then ended up getting a proper license. And but this can't be a simple task. Putting a DAB station on would require a certain amount of expertise. So can't say we condone this because obviously it's illegal, but it's very interesting.
Yeah. And Ed, you were saying that the amount of time it takes is got to be stupid, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, in the article here it says, you've got to wait 5 months after you've applied. You've got to take a license out for 5 years, and that's a minimum of €14,000. And then when you do that, your audience is, occasionally in Cork, occasionally in Dublin, because they're still only doing trials. It's just taking forever to try and get DAB in. As we know, we all on this podcast have often said it's a technology that should be dead and buried. But let's look at these people not as pirates, but maybe as entrepreneurs. And as we've said, they're not hijacking an existing transmitter. They're setting up a new transmitter and all the multiplexing system to run 10 stations off that one transmitter using the DAB standard. So they're investing a lot of money into it. So they're doing something that the official EIR DAB company that's supposed to be rolling this out don't seem able to do. So, at the end of the day, yeah, it's not legal what they're doing, but at the same time, I think the businesses, not just the general public, but the businesses are getting fed up with waiting. And as we're saying, they've taken it into their own hands. And in some ways, from a technical point of view, well done. From a legal point of view, naughty. But again, echoing what's been said, the people behind the free DAB platform, as they're calling it, will probably in the future become some of the main stations on the legal one.
Yeah, well, to quote two phrases of Colin, and this is a quote from Colin, in Ireland, God loves a trier. That would be number one. And the other one is, you beg for forgiveness. You don't ask to do something, you beg for forgiveness afterwards. So this may be what's happening.
And the other thing, Martin, you said when you were over there and you wanted to buy a simple FM radio, you went to one of the large supermarket chains and bought one, only to find it had DAB on it already. So I guess that might be a common thing in Ireland now, that there are the people there that can receive it. There's just no transmitter stations to send it.
Yeah, very possibly. And it did say then, this was 2 or 3 years ago, and it did say there are only DAB services in Dublin and Cork. The rest of the country is not covered. So just goes to show that, technology takes a while to propagate. Moving to our next news story, saltwater and plastic antennas. Well, I think a while ago we talked about this, and I remember a guy with a pump shooting a jet of water in the air and loading that up as an antenna, but I don't think this is quite the same. But Ed, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, I can do. It's interesting from a technology point of view. I can't, as I said to the group before this, before the start of the show, I can't see it really being used so much for amateur radio. Reading the article, it seems to be an idea that it might be used for 5G networks, for transmitters on 5G networks. The principle is there's one monopole in the middle of a set of, I think, 12 others, and each of these can have salt water pumped into them, which obviously conducts electricity and therefore acts as an element of an antenna. And the effect is by controlling which tubes you pump the salt water into in the circle around the central one, they affect the direction of transmission and I presume reception, so that you've got a totally steerable antenna in quite a small space. Yeah, it's one of these things where the technology is good. Is it something that we're going to see everywhere in the next year or something? I doubt it. I suspect there's a lot of development to go on, but it's good to see development happening here. This is actually in Nanjing University of Aeronautics and Astronautics in China that are working on it at the moment, but they also say that there have been previous previous designs. So it's not extremely new, but it's an interesting UHF antenna. And as I say, it seems to be main market it's going to be aimed at will be 5G.
Right. Okay. Well, let's say interesting technology, and I know this is not amateur radio, but we kind of need to keep abreast of what's happening because you never know what will happen, and you might find that there's an amateur involved in this somewhere, or a group of amateurs will go off and do something very, very similar. But Frank, you read the document, and you were quite excited about this, weren't you?
I am, and let me lead in my response with your comment. You know, it's not exactly amateur radio. I would add one word: yet. When software-defined radios were being bandied around somewhat like this, it wasn't amateur radio until Gerald Youngblood wrote 4 papers in QEX magazine and built a company off of it, Flex Radio Systems now, and it's software-defined radio is sort of all the rage, if you will. Whether this would become that for antennas, I'm like Ed, I seriously doubt it. However, when you look at the technology of beam forming, imagine having a traditional Yagi array for, some frequency, and you have to turn the thing. Well, we've now gone to where we turn towers and rotate towers around a pedestal rather than always turn, the beam. Well, in this case, nothing moves physically. And as Ed described, you've got a disc with a central resin tube or acrylic tube in the center, and you have a dozen monopoles around it, like a big plug that you might think would plug into something else. But then the control apparatus puts salt water into some of those tubes and removes it from others. And that is the beam forming capability of this. And the particular research paper is focused on UHF, and that was sort of their proof of concept. Where that would go in our pre-show discussion, kind of letting my mind wander, most of us might think a step IR beam antenna that looks a little bit like a trumpet with, the thing that goes in and out to change the sound. Wow, that's what step IR did and patented it to change the length of an antenna to resonate. Would we have something where you have chambers and you move water in and out to make it longer or shorter in the future? Who knows? But that's why it's called basic research. And I am quite excited about it. And it's been some military-based work for submarines and other stuff in saline antennas. But we ought to keep an eye on this because it's not amateur radio yet.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. And the other thing, I suppose, is if you're in an experimental mode, why not do it at 70 SEMS where you've got manageable size? If you were doing it at, say, 160 meters, you'd have massive great tubes and you'd have massive problems. But sorting it out at, say, UHF's probably the right way to do it, I would have thought. Chris, what's your thoughts?
So I think this is obviously very, very cutting edge, very, very cutting edge, very new technology, very clever. Interesting talking about beams. I remember going to a presentation a few years ago in Inmarsat, who are a very large communication provider based in London that do satellite communications and satellite tracking and lots of work in the world of aviation and marine, as well as satellite telephones. And they use beams. Their satellites, they can actually, I believe, steer beams, and they can focus their coverage in different parts of the world, depending on how busy a certain part of the world is. That was quite interesting. We got to visit their operation centre. It's a bit like some sort of James Bond style, big, massive screens on the wall, kind of a bit like you'd expect at NORAD sort of place, And they were showing us on the screens there the different beams and where they were kind of focused at that particular time based on where their demand was. So it's not a brand new technology, but I'm sure they're taking this to the next level with this research that's going on. So can't we add a lot to everyone else has said? But it just sounds like it's very clever technology. And like Frank was saying, what's today's cutting edge research products tomorrow's mainstream products?
Yeah, I think you're right there, Chris. I think you're right. Well, I think it's something we'll keep an eye on over the years. And as I say, there's so much going on in radio and our hobby that I think it'll be interesting if they do pull something out of it. Moving to our next news story, the US Air Force are to let hackers try to hijack an orbiting satellite. Now, that sounds really panicky, but no, they're talking about next year's DEFCON and trying to see if people can hack a satellite, a team of people. Frank, do you want to go first on this one?
Sure. And this is something that is not surprising to me. At the university where I taught for a number of years and retired, Mississippi State University, had a long-standing cybersecurity center. So I was somewhat familiar with the research that was going on there, and it certainly just continued on to present day. Witness our first story, North Korea. We've certainly had those kind of things there. So what the Air Force is doing is reaching out to the sort of hobbyist and professional community, kind of like a Hamfest. We have professionals and hobbyists at Hamfest in DEF CON to try to engage the talent who deal with hacking in white hat terms for good purposes. Going to give them a satellite to see if they can hack into it, but it's going to be fairly controlled, as the article in Wired magazine sort of describes. So I think this is a good test. And remember, our president in the U.S. just announced a Space Force. So the Air Force is expanding into space as a military division for the Department of Defense in the U.S. So I think this fits right into it.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see what they do. Chris, we've never been to DEF CON, but I know Bill has. But what's your thoughts?
Well, I think, as Frank was saying, I think this is a great coup from the Air Force to really work together with that community. I think the armed services mission is changing. They're still going to have the guys with the guns and the airplanes and the bombs and the tanks and all that stuff, but also there's a huge move now towards cyber warfare, I think, as Frank was saying. So I think they need to attract people that have those skills, and DEF CON's the sort of place you're going to find those people. So having an event like this, I think, is a really good way to engage those people and maybe recruit them into the parts of the forces where they're needed.
Yeah, I think you're right. Ed, any last words on this one?
Yeah, just following on what was said, they're actually already starting to recruit because the invitations are open for people to apply to the USAF if they want to take part in this. And in the next several months, they'll be going through vetting the people to come up with a team that will then be flown out by the USAF to DEF CON next year. And then they will be given basically a satellite that they can hack, or they can try to hack. But of course, in the process, the US Air Force have got a contact with a lot of good, well-qualified security specialists that they may well then offer jobs to, or they'll just use the what they find if the group does actually manage to get into the satellite from DEF CON, then based on that, they'll obviously improve the next satellites and all the other satellites. So it's rather a smart way of getting experts to do the work for you, basically for nothing. I'm sure there'll be some prizes or whatever as well, but it's a novel way to find your new employees as well, perhaps.
It certainly is, and there's also the other thing of people who write or put together systems rely on us understanding the rules on how to use them, or they write the rules. And if somebody's thinking out of the box, then there may be vulnerabilities because purely somebody's just thought out of the box, a completely different way of doing it. And I'm not going to go into it on this podcast, but there's a classic example of that in a computer game, and Colin, when he was about 3 or 4, beating the computer game hands down because he didn't understand the rules of how to play it. And he beat it because we were all playing the rules, and he didn't, and he won. So, interesting. I think it's a good thing to open it up to the general public. Moving on, news from the ACMA. Lots of nice new bits hot off the press, aren't they, Ed?
Yep, ACMA is your equivalent of the FCC or Ofcom or BNetC. It's the regulator in Australia. And over the last year, they've had a survey, or last 6 months, they've had a survey asking questions about what should be in the plan for the next several years for the amateur radio fraternity and what needs to be changed, etc., etc. And there's quite a few different requests went in, but now we've got the results. And these actually came out, I think, 2 days ago and were implemented or registered yesterday. So I presume that means it's now the case, or if not, it certainly will be in a few days' time. The major highlights, we've got the actual link to the documents in the show notes. So anybody who wants to check this out in detail, please go via the link. But the major highlights is the foundation license holders up until now have not been allowed to operate the digital modes, be it digital voice or digital data. They now can do so. They can now also connect their computers to the internet. That restriction has been taken away. And they can also build and operate their own equipment. And that's probably the big one. So, there's a lot of responsibility with that, but the regulator have said, you're going to regulate within your own organisation, within your own hobby. Anyway, if there are problems, there are laws that control that. So why should we restrict people from experimenting, which is what's been happening up until now, and trying out new things? Next one on the list there was, what that actually means now is that all classes of license can now operate all modes. There's no modes that they say with that class of license you're not allowed to operate that mode. Everybody can do everything. The maximum bandwidth of signals on the HF bands has now been increased to 8 kilohertz. The LF and MF bands, so 630 and 2200 meters, are still 2.1 kilohertz. And when you get over 10 meters, it goes up to 16 kilohertz. So a lot more room there to experiment with new digital modes, wideband modes, etc. But what might upset some of the listeners is that what hasn't changed are the power levels permitted and the bands usable for each of the 3 license classes. At the end of the day, it was thought that the incentive to upgrade through the 3 tiers of license classes was more important than giving everybody the full 400 watts, for example. The other question was when will they get 60 meters, the 5 megahertz band? That is still under consideration. It's not been authorized by this change to the license conditions. The reason there is that the frequency itself, or the band of frequencies, have been in use by other services for quite some time. So there has to be some agreement there. One negative, the shared 3.6 gigahertz band, so into the microwaves, in certain areas of the country will now be restricted going forwards because of other technologies that have been developed and implemented there. So that's the changes to the regulations and the license conditions. The other thing is that of interest to the US listeners, back in April, the ACMA actually put a hold on issuing of any reciprocal licenses for US hams. There were some problems between the equivalence of the different license classes. That's now been sorted out so that if anybody wants to go to Australia from the US, they can apply for a reciprocal license for 12 months or up to 12 months. After that, they have to pass the Australian exams. And they will get the equivalent approved license. Now, I'm not sure. Certainly, from reading the website, they refer to the extra license class and the general license class in the US. The technician, I'm not sure about. So you'd have to apply there and see what the ACMA say. However, there is effectively a 3-tier system on both sides, so maybe that's going to be okay. This does not affect the CEPT arrangements where you can go if you have a full or an extra class license from the US and just simply operate for up to 3 months in Australia without having to apply for a separate license or anything. So that's a summary of everything. So basically, of the half of the things that were asked for, the ACMA has come back and said, yes, that makes sense to us, we'll do it. A couple of things there they're still considering, but certainly the power and bands, that's basically said, no, we're not changing. So that's really hot off the press. That's like happened in the last couple of days, both of those items. Is it good? Yes, I think so. It's good. The regulators listen to the amateur radio groups, to both the WIA and to RASA, and this is what comes out of working together. And by the way, in Australia, we still pay an annual fee for the license. Back to you, Martin.
Right, yeah. Well, that's a lot happening there. I don't know if Chris agrees with me, but I'm glad they kept something in there that gives you the incentive to move up by giving you more bands and more power. A lot of the things you talked about certainly make sense. There's no reason why somebody can't do digital modes on all license levels. But what do you think, Chris?
Well, there's not a lot I can add. Obviously, Ed's gone through an awful lot of detail there. I mean, I think the main thing is that things are progressing, things are changing. There's been a conversation, a consultation with amateurs by the regulator, and they've listened and they've made some changes, and I think that's a good thing. I think I'm with you there, Martin. I think there does need to be an incentive to upgrade your license, and if you give it everything to everyone, then why would you bother to upgrade? I suppose. So I think I agree with you on that one. I think there is probably a need to retain hold some things back to make it worthwhile getting your going up the license levels. But I think on the whole, I think that's quite a very positive thing.
Yeah, well, we'll see if other countries around the world follow suit at some point in time. Frank, are you any thoughts on this one?
Well, I was delighted to see that the reciprocal licensing arrangement with the states, has gotten a little more rational. And I think most of us can understand the principle of why buy a cow when you get the milk free. So I think your points are well taken here.
Right. Well, as I say, interesting times down there in Australia, and we'll keep an eye on it. Moving to our last news story, and Frank, I'm going to bring you in first on this one because you put it up. This is another one fairly hot off the press, but the ARRL thank the official observers as volunteer monitor program is set to debut. So it's all going to happen fairly quickly, isn't it, Frank?
It is, and this has been, out in the ARRL-related media, if you will, for a few months since it was approved. But the official observer program that been around for about 85 years will end officially next week. And on October 1st, the volunteer monitor program will start. And many hams might say, OOVM, what's the difference? Well, there's some significant differences here. One, the new memorandum of understanding between the league and the FCC gives the league's volunteer monitoring program the ability to actually collect forensic data for violations. Now, the reason for that is, as we've covered here on this podcast and many others have, the FCC has had drastic cuts in their field staff, including the enforcement bureaus. And in some of the areas of the U.S. that's covered by a particular enforcement bureau, they're exceptionally shorthanded. And so this is kind of a partnership with the league and the FCC to have a more robust program that can actually help the FCC Enforcement Bureau actually gather data that they can use when they do notice of violations. Now, that's number one. The second thing is this is not a local appointment. And by that, here in the States, the ARRL has states, or what we call sections. Some big states like Texas and California and Florida and New York might be split up because of the great number of hams. But each section manager would appoint so many official observers. That will be kaput as of the onset of this new program. It will all be handled at the league office itself. And Dan Henderson is the ARL staff member who is in charge of that. We've covered on this podcast their announcement to hire someone who would actually coordinate this program. And I think Dan Romanchek and I both thought that Riley Hollingsworth, who retired from the FCC Enforcement Bureau, and he was in charge of amateur radio enforcement, would be a likely candidate. And in fact, that's who they hired. And so Riley Hollingsworth and Dan Henderson are in charge of those appointments. And I've been in a position as an assistant director for one of the divisions, the Delta Division, of advising Dan and Riley on technology and the program rollout. So I've seen some of what they're doing. There is a very significant training program that they're putting in place and is well underway. And there will be, some numbering in the hundreds of volunteer monitors. Who they are will remain confidential because that will help in doing so. My final point that I want to make is the mission is not to be the band police. They're not the frequency cops. In fact, the main mission is a form of elmering and teaching about things that many hams might, not pay attention to, get too close to the band edge, things of that nature, where they might cause real interference. That will be the preponderance of the monitoring activities, and some of which will be good operator certificates will be generated, and to recognize when people go out of their way to do something really, really good, whether it's dramatic like handle an SOS call or something fairly mundane like a new ham's first contact and an operator welcomes them into the hobby. So there'll be a lot of the pat on the back, good guy certification stuff. So I'll end with that it's not the band police, and that's definitely not the mission. And so they are hard at work with those who have been accepted into the VM program, getting them ready to go about this new mission. And that will kick off on October the 1st.
Yeah, so it's just after the podcast releases, the new program takes place. And I think it's a good thing. If you're encouraging people and rewarding, it sometimes has much better effect than beating them with a stick. What do you think, Chris?
I think it's interesting that the FCC have kind of, I'm guessing because, as Frank was saying, because the resources are not there, they've kind of handed this over to the amateur world to sort of, I guess, self-police. It actually reminds me of a story here in the UK where we have a similar service, or we had a similar service called AROS, which was the Amateur Radio Observation Service, which is a team organised by the RSGB to essentially listen and gather evidence of naughtiness, shall we say, abuse on the amateur bands, and then submit that to, or essentially initially try to resolve it amicably, and if not, I think then go to Ofcom and put forward official complaints and things. Interestingly, that group was disbanded last year. I'm looking at the website for the RSGB. Last July, I think it was, that was reviewed, and that's now been replaced by something called the Operating Advisory Service, and that essentially is where, rather than now investigating that sort of, or essentially gathering evidence, shall we say, about that sort of behaviour, the Operating Advisory Service now essentially provides guidance and promotes good practice around managing, on-air activities that are, should we say, unpleasant. So things like repeater abuse, that sort of thing. So a slightly subtle change to the way things have happened over here. So we seem to have gone in the opposite direction in the US. The kind of the FCC, the regulator, handing control of this to the amateurs, and whereas here in the UK, kind of moving away from that and moving more towards just providing advice. So quite an interesting difference in the way things are handled. I do remember we had a talk from a guy from AROS, and I think it's probably similar to the States in terms of actually the number of... Well, actually, I think we do hear stories, don't we, on the podcast about people that have been prosecuted in the States by the FCC for misusing their radio equipment. And the guy from AROS, and I asked him the question, how many people have been prosecuted by Ofcom? I think the answer was 0. So very little, in fact, pretty much no enforcement action at all from Ofcom around the amateur radio bands, recently at least.
Well, if you can educate and stop people making mistakes, And if it's a genuine mistake, and this is where I'm probably going to get about 5 million letters to me, but if it's a genuine mistake, politely tell the person. Don't shout at them. Come on, guys. If it's a genuine, simple mistake, like something stupid, like you haven't given your call sign or you haven't said your mobile, and technically they're the two things that actually you don't have to do anymore. Well, you have to give your call sign, but you don't have to give it at set time intervals in the UK. Therefore, the license has changed. And if you're a little bit long, or I'm driving down the road and I don't say I'm mobile, technically I don't have to. But in fairness, it's about educating people. And I think that's the important thing. What's your thoughts on this one, Ed?
Yeah, I haven't got a lot to add. I basically agree with everything that's said and wish the new programme good luck.
Well, I think it'll be a good programme, mate. So, let's see how it all goes. Right, that concludes our news stories. Now I'm going to ask you what you've been up to amateur radio-wise since the last episode. Ed, I'm going to let you go first on this one.
Okay, well, I've got to admit, you'd normally hear me coming back with, I've done this SOTA activation and been out and done that and visited everything else. Since the last time I was on the ICQPodcast, I don't think I've done any SOTA activations, partially weather, partially lack of time. I've actually been busy constructing, and I've got two projects on the workbench at the moment. One is a HF bands linear amplifier, to use from SOTA Summit. So it's going to give me somewhere between 50 and 100 watts PEP out, which I'm finding other stations have that are making contacts where I am not in the current bad propagation conditions. So unfortunately, it's a case of if you can't beat them, join them. And the other one is an interesting kit I've bought for a transverter to use with my IC7300 to add 2 meters to it. So it'll then cover from top band all the way through to 2 meters, and using the one rig. And hopefully those are both actually kits that the boards are pre-populated. So it's a matter of boxing them up and cabling them up and aligning them. And hopefully that should be fairly straightforward. But all these things always take time. But a lot of construction since the last time I was on ICQPodcast.
Well, you can't always operate, mate. But as I say, sounds like you've been extremely busy. I'm finding that at the moment, while Colin's releasing podcasts almost once a week, I can't remember whether I've said some of these things or not. But before I go, Frank, what have you been up to radio-wise in since the last time?
Well, I've been building a new project, primarily collecting the parts, a little sort of like a Pelican case, although I'm using a knockoff version with a small APRS Digi iGate in it, so that on these portable things that we do, bike races and other public service events where we don't have good APRS coverage, particularly for handies, be able to set that up. And I've kind of got that designed and waiting on a screen. It'll have a touch screen in the lid. When you open it up, you'll be able to actually, manipulate, and it'll run Windows interface in a very small fanless computer. So I've been working on that project. Been trying to get things finalized for a big announcement next month that you're part of, and Colin is part of, Martin. Our Homebrew Heroes program, our anonymous selection committee has made a recommendation for a recipient, and we will have a formal announcement sometime in October. So I've been doing some work there and trying to get the corporations who've donated prizes, those things out to our recipients. So I've been doing a bit of that work, been doing a little advising on technology for the Volunteer Monitor program. And, little bits and pieces here in the shack trying to push it along, but not as active as I have been, primarily pushing paper.
Yeah, I know what it's like, Frank. I know what it's like, but as I say, all good in the hobby. Chris, I'll always leave you to last because you and I do lots of things together. So if you mention it, I
Well,
don't.
There's a few here that we've done together. So the first one, I was making a few little notes here while the other guys were chatting. So you put me onto this idea of this MMDVM board. So I think there was very cheap little board that goes on your Raspberry Pi, which turns it into a MMDVM standing for Multimedia Digital Voice Modem, I believe. So you got one. I thought, that looks good. So I bought one. So I've been playing with mine. Finally got around to getting it working. I had some problems. So essentially, you use it with the Pi-Star software. So you buy this little board. I know, Martin, you've done the same. I think mine cost something like £13 from eBay. I think it came from the Far East. And essentially, it turns your little Raspberry Pi into a little hotspot for some of the digital voice modes. So this works, I believe, with D-Star, DMR, Fusion, P25, so a lot of things, I think, actually simultaneously. You use the Pi-Star software. It took a little bit of time to get that working on. I've got various different Raspberry Pis hanging around the house, so eventually I got it working with the Pi 2. I had some problems getting a Pi 3 to boot. I'm not sure quite why just yet. But anyway, the Pi 2 works perfectly well, so I got that going. I've been using that with D-Star a couple of times, and I've had a couple of contacts from D-Star, which I haven't used for quite a long time. So that was good. And my next plan with that is to get it working with DMR. No, Martin, you've got yours working with DMR, so I might need some of your help with that. But we'll do that. I still haven't had time to get around to doing that. So that's good. That's ongoing. And I also want to get the little LED screen working as well with it, which would be quite nice as well to see what it's doing. So that would be good. We've also been to HMS Belfast at the weekend, haven't we, Martin? And we met up with Scott McDonald and his wife Sarah. That was great. So we had Scott and Sarah with us. Scott got to operate from the ship, which was great. We spent some time with them, which was great. We met up with Scott and Sarah, who are listeners to the podcast in Chicago, when we came over to Dayton, and it was great to meet them over here while they were here. We also had an amateur visitors from New Zealand, and sadly I didn't get the chap's details, so I apologise. I know you listened to the podcast, but unless you, Martin, got his call sign or name, unfortunately, I forgot to grab it, so apologies, but we did meet up with an amateur from New Zealand who popped in to see us. And we also had a contact, didn't we, Martin? Or in fact, Scott had a contact with a station in the Highlands, there's Maritime Mobile, that was a listener as well. And Martin, did you get that person's call sign?
I was trying to get it off the video. I was videoing at the time. I got a little bit of video for Scott, so he can take it away to prove he's actually been on the Belfast and operated. But it was down in noise. I was starting to work it out, and then I got, like many things at the moment, we got a lot on. I got hijacked for something else, and I'm now sitting here kicking myself thinking I never went back and got that call sign. But it was a gentleman in a Maritime Mobile off the Isles of Shetland. Okay,
so apologies again, but another listener we spoke to this time on the air. So that was that's always good to talk to listeners to the podcast on the radio. It's always amazing that people actually listen to us on this. We just assume we're having a chat, and I don't realise people actually listen to what we're saying. So when people say, "I recognise your voice," that's quite weird to me. But anyway, so that was the Belfast. That was good. And as usual, we had lots of chats at the public and more certificates and that sort of thing, which was great. Interestingly, we had a couple of teachers turn up on board, and they were chatting about, they were quite interested in Morse code and using it as a teaching, lessons and things around it. So I kind of gave some advice on that, around maybe doing a little circuit with a switch, with a buzzer, maybe to teach a little bit about science. So I think they were both teachers of kind of junior school, so fairly young, this sort of younger age bracket. So I think there's some good scope there for teaching around science, building a little circuit with a buzzer, and also around history, talking about where Morse code came from, about Samuel Morse and Alfred Vail, and there's various things you can hook into that particular story. So I think that was a good one, actually. I think they were going to go away and think about using Morse code as a way of teaching those subjects. I thought that was a good one. Other things going on, Martin, I know you've been working on the new training course you got coming up in October. It's the new syllabus, which you've spoken about before on the podcast. This will be our first course based on the new syllabus. And Martin, I know you've been working hard on updating the slides, updating the material to make sure that we're actually up to date, because there's a few things that have changed. But Martin, I'll perhaps let you talk a little more about that on your section. I don't think I've been on the podcast since we've come back from SSB Field Day. It was a couple of weeks ago now. So that was fun. I think Matthew talked about it on the previous podcast. So just to say it was the usual great fun. We operating from a field. It was pretty cold this year, but it was the usual fun. And then finally, this weekend we have the National Hamfest in Newark. So myself and Martin, I know you're going, and we've got a few other guys. I think Colin's coming over, isn't he, from Ireland? We've got a few of the other guys going along as well. So we'll be up there on this Friday and Saturday, I believe, as well, Martin. And then I think we're going somewhere else Sunday. So that's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to that. I always do each year. That's a good event to go to. So hopefully we'll have some interviews and things from that in a future episode.
Yeah, well, you've been pretty busy, Chris. Pretty busy, as you can say. Yeah, I have done a lot playing with DMR, probably too much. Joined the Cyprus Net a few times, and it's fun. Not managed to catch up with Dan again since the first time, but I will. I'll keep mithering him. I think you said it all for HMS Belfast. Great time with Scott and Sarah. Lovely people. And a great day. You did hijack me to do a club talk last week, which I did. I got away with that one. It's another one in the book.
Oh, I did, didn't I? Yes, another one, yes. Thank you.
So I got away with that one. Yeah, I have been working on the training slides and just going through and just updating, taking bits out, putting new bits in. So, yeah, it doesn't look that much difficult, in fairness, so we should be okay on that. Been doing a fair amount of reading, but the reason I've been doing a fair amount of reading is 2 weeks ago I started a new job, probably mentioned it on the last podcast, and then on the Saturday I fell off a ladder. Now, I wasn't even putting up an antenna, so that's the pain, but I fell off a ladder and I was a bit incapacitated for a week. I had to have a week, start a new job, and then the second week I'm off sick. But anyway, I'm back now. So that's all happening. Yeah, we're going to be in Newark. Guys in Newark. Colin's over from Ireland. Chris is going, as he said. Who else we got? We've got Edmund's going. Martin Rothwell's going. I'm going. And be afraid. Be very afraid. Mrs. B's going. So, yeah, she don't take prisoners. But no, she'll be there. Mrs. B will be with us as well. So
we're on best behaviour, Martin.
Yeah, well, no, there's no hope of that, is there? But, yeah.
No, I mean, we're on best behaviour, not Mrs. B.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, all in all, we've had a very busy time, and I'm not going to tell you what we're doing on Sunday, because that's recording a future feature, which I think you guys will be really, really interested in going forward. So, all in all, another busy episode. Well, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining us tonight. Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP.
Yeah, thanks. Nice to have been on again, and all the best for the guys going to the National Hamfest. Have fun and get lots of recordings of the listeners if you meet them.
Yeah, that's always fun. I'd like to thank Mr. Frank Howell K4FMH. Thanks, Frank.
Thank you, and 7-3, everyone. And have a great Hamfest or two, guys. You're going to be busy.
We certainly are. And thanks once again to Mr. Chris Howard M0TCH.
Yeah, cheers, Martin. And if you do see us in our orange T-shirts at the Hamfest, please go and say hello. We'd love to speak to our listeners if you spot us there.
Yeah. Right, well now, thank you very much, guys, for joining us. We're going to now move on with the rest of the podcast. 7-3.
7-3.
7-3.
Hi, Mrs. B here. The guys thank you very much for your downloads. However, there are a few things that would help the ICQ podcast to continue to grow. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We need you, and it's free. 73's Mrs. B.
And now it's time to have a look at a news in brief with me, Colin M6BOY. Breaking news here about the National Club of the Year Awards for 2018 were announced at UK Hamfest this year. Prizes were sponsored by UK retailer Walter & Stanton's, and the winners of the overall category were Hildestone Radio Society in Region 10. Runners-up were Bush Valley Amateur Radio Club in Region 8, and third place went to Essex Hams in Region 12. So congratulations to Hildestone Radio Society for your win. Now, changing license conditions are coming there for VK license holders in Australia, and these are going to affect all three license classes from the 21st of September, so just over a week ago these came into effect. Principal changes for advanced and standard license holders are the removal of bandwidth restrictions for frequencies from 1.8 MHz and above. Big winners, though, could be said to be the foundation license holders, with mode and equipment restrictions being removed. This means a foundation license holder can now use computer-generated modes, and they are no longer limited to using only commercially manufactured radios. So interesting news there coming from Australia about changes in their license band. Now, special events prefixes to look out for in Belgium to celebrate the birthday of Her Royal Highness Princess Elizabeth of Belgium. Radio amateurs may use the prefix OR instead of ON from the 25th of October to the 25th of December. So interesting cool signs to look out for to celebrate the birthday of Her Royal Highness the Princess Elizabeth of Belgium. Well, now we're going to head over to our features episode, which is our feature on Hamfest 2019. As always, guys, I hope you enjoy.
And now, what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast.
Well, we're putting together here the feature post UK Hamfest 2019, which finished just a couple of hours ago for you here for episode 306 of the ICQ podcast. With a lot of major announcements already made earlier in the year at Dayton, Ohio, and at Friedrichshafen, it was really an opportunity for maybe some of the smaller manufacturers to show their innovations and also some updates from popular vendors. So we've got updates from Elecraft and Yaesu coming for you. Also, SDR Play give us an update on what they're up to, along with new products coming from SOTABeams and BHI, and interestingly, a new manufacturer of antennas coming into the market called CEECom, and we were able to chat to their founder about what they intend to do with antennas in the amateur radio market. So we're going to start off with Chris's interview with SDR Play, and between Chris M0TCH and Martin M1MRB, they're going to be bringing you the interviews we recorded at Hamfest 2019. Hope you enjoy.
So we're here on the SDR Play stand. It's Newark 2019, and I'm joined by Mike Ladd from SDR Play. Welcome, Mike.
How are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
Thank you
Mike's
for having
flown
me.
in from the States. I know, Mike, you live in Florida, don't you?
Yes, that's correct.
And I'm also not a fan of flying particularly, are you?
No, not at all. I have a massive fear of heights and flying.
So we're very grateful that you've overcome that fear for us and you've joined us again.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, we saw you back in Dayton. I don't think we actually interviewed you back in Dayton back in May, but I know you were there when we spoke to Andy and we talked about the new facilities and the software.
Right, when we showcased diversity reception, and I believe it was with scanning and all the other changes that were made to SDR Uno. I believe at that time at Dayton it was 1.31, and then we released version 1.32, which was just basically a bug fix release.
Yeah. For
the newer features in 1.31 that were showcased at Dayton.
Sure, and that's now out. You can download that.
Yeah. SDRplay.com downloads, and there's a download spot right over there for SDR Uno, which is Windows only. It's going to go cross-platform in the future.
Sure.
I don't have a date for when that's going to happen, but it is in the works.
Perfect. Good. Okay. So, Mike, your role in SDR Play is all about providing that support for people that either want to go and buy a device or to do with the software.
I would say, in all honesty, I'm the biggest fanboy of SDR Play, to be honest.
You started out before becoming an employee.
Correct. I was an admin of the Facebook group when there was about 75 members, which is now, it's an independent group. It's independent from SDR Play and run by enthusiasts.
Yeah.
And I joined up that group when there was about 50 to 75 members, and I became an admin. This is going 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, and now it's grown to 11,000 members.
Wow.
And it brought me closer to the company where I was doing beta testing for hardware and for software. And it turned into a full-time job to where my function is technical support, but I also do documentation. I do videos, and I maintain the SDR Uno manual. So all the changes, even though there are mistakes, I know people are going to say there's errors and omissions there, but I maintain that, man. Just basically doing anything that's, helping customers come to grips with SDR Uno and our products. Because I'm not, I don't just work for the company. It sounds funny. I'm also a user. I use this every day.
And I'm an SDR Play customer, and I've got an SDR Play at home that I use, and I subscribe to the Facebook. And you are on there. Any questions?
I live there.
You are on there.
Yeah, I live in that group.
I think Mike is one of the hardest looking guys in amateur radio, frankly.
Yeah. I try to, not that I know all the answers, because I don't know it all.
Yeah.
But I'll try to give my experiences through trial and error to help other users. This way they don't have to sit there and wait. I've tried that, it didn't work. I've tried this, it didn't work. I've tried it, and I figured out what does make it work, and I'll gear that towards making it simple.
And I've got to say, actually, so when I first got, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, I bought my first SDR Play SDR device here, and I wanted to make it work with my Yaesu FTDX3000, and it was exactly what you just described.
The video that I made.
You did it.
Right.
I just followed the video. If I hadn't had the video and I just had this to do myself, I would have probably spent weeks of frustration trying to
I didn't know you watched that.
Yeah.
Well, good.
And following your video, it just worked. Good. And actually, that was a really successful.
I'm pleased to know that.
So we do appreciate the things that you do.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And it makes me feel funny, not to interrupt you, when people thank me and they go. I appreciate all the I guess you could say, love and support. I don't do it for the thanks. I do it. I want to give to this community. I embrace the community because, as I told you in the first interview, I come from the community.
Yeah.
So I feel that as a ham radio operator, which I am, and a radio enthusiast, that's what this is all about, and that's my standard. I'll always be like that, where you have to help the people that helped you, even if it's not direct.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned earlier you live in Florida.
Correct.
And we watch your videos, we watch the things that you do on Facebook, and you do some quite cool things. You're sort of giving us ideas of what we can use this platform for. It's not just a case of saying, there's a radio receiver. So tell us about some of the things that you enjoy doing, and maybe how
my big thing is I'm an HF listener, shortwave listener, and the RSP is a versatile receiver where it can go up to 2 gigahertz. But I'm a 30 megahertz and below listener.
Yeah.
But then I started getting into the satellite reception and communication with decoding L-band, Inmarsat satellite, STD-C messages, NOAA transmissions that, because they're polar orbiting satellites that go over and capture images, and I can get weather. They're almost like WeFax images. Sure. And I can get real-time weather, and I can tune to the Weather Channel. I can go on a website, but I want to do it on my radio.
Now, you mentioned earlier that living in Florida, you get the hurricane season.
Yeah.
And actually, that for you has been actually a genuine benefit.
Without it, I wouldn't be in the loop, because I don't know which agency to go. I trust NOAA, which is our news, our scientific group in the United States. And when they're transmitting these images over NOAA satellites, it's real time. It's right then and there. It's that image. It's live. And I can get it there, and I can make a judgment call to keep my family safe. I use the RSP, but it wasn't for the RSP, and all kidding, I could watch the Weather Channel, but I used the RSP instead, and I based my family's safety on what I was receiving because of the RSP.
Sure.
I was able to leave in time to get ahead of that storm, even though it didn't hit us, but I was able to make a judgment call.
So maybe go into a little bit of detail. So what have you used to do that? Obviously, you've got the RSP device.
I use the RSP, in SDR Uno, I'm tuning to a VHF frequency, and I'm using third-party software to pipe the signal from SDR Uno into these decoders. This way I can see these images.
Yeah.
These hardware can tune it. The RSP can tune anywhere from 1 kilohertz to 2 gigahertz continuous. But if there's a mode, you need a decoder to have that mode, to decode that signal.
Yeah.
So it could be, from WeFax images to satellite images, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
You just need to find a decoder that does it.
And I've seen that you've produced files you can download that contain the frequencies and that sort of thing.
Correct, because as I said earlier, I was listening to from 30 megahertz and below.
Talking about, I think that's the rain.
That's a heavy storm.
Yeah.
So I was basically a 30 megahertz and below, and I had a lot of reading to do. So I didn't want to put it out there out of my own, I guess, esteem or what the word would be. So I hit the books.
Yeah.
And I read and watched videos, and I did a lot of trial and error until it made sense to me. If I could grasp it within a week, then I can teach it to other people in a couple of days.
And that has a lot of value. So what I get frustrated with other products are you buy a product, especially in the early days of a product where maybe it's not been around very long, people have their time to play with it, and you are spending a lot of time fiddling and getting frustrated. And what I like about the things that you do is you make that a lot easier. You've actually done that hard work for us, and we can just pick up from you've done it for us, and we can then just say, okay, I'm going to apply that, and you've got a working solution. And that's a really valuable thing.
Yes. I want to make it as simple as possible, introducing somebody to something new, because it's something new to me. I'm introducing myself to satellite communication, which I really know nothing about.
Yeah.
So after a lot of reading, you want to pass that knowledge on, and I want to make it as simple as possible.
Yeah. You also mentioned earlier about receiving some Inmarsat data.
That's the latest thing that I've been into is decoding the Inmarsat satellites.
Okay, now I've probably got to say at this point, check legally what you're allowed to do.
Correct. There's a lot of legalities with privacy or privacy of what you're decoding. I go on ethics, old ethics of don't divulge what you're seeing. If you're seeing something that seems out of line or whatever the case is, it's a great thing to do, but to decode these messages, but don't act on them. Just
However, we've got to say legally, check the laws wherever
absolutely,
you are.
100% check your local. What laws apply to me in the States might not apply to you. What applies to you in your region might not apply to me.
Sure.
So,
however, that aside, so you've been playing with this stuff. So how have you got on with that?
I love it. Yeah? It blows my mind away because the signal's coming from 22,000 miles away. Okay, it's not
this
like
is the geostationary orbit satellites.
It's phenomenal, and for something to recycle my love of the hobby, the way that did. I mean, I was sitting in my car for 5 hours at a time, using a GPS antenna. And I have to say, if it wasn't for SDR Kits' GPS antenna, which they have, it's an Inmarsat, $12 I think it was, or $15, and it opened up the doors for me getting into satellite communication.
So how did you learn? How did you learn how to do that? Was that a lot of reading or websites? Or?
It was trial and error. It's watching some videos, it's taking, as you would say, bits and bobs, bits and pieces from everything, and I compiled a PDF to put you on the right track. And now that you have enough information, now you take that and you pass that torch.
Sure.
You take it to where you want to go with it. Yeah. I give you just enough to explain it all, and to where you're comfortable and you go, okay, that makes sense, but I want to know more. It's out there. There's tons of resources out there. So I made a PDF, made videos. No claim that I'm an expert, because I'm far from it, but I'm just an enthusiast, just like everybody else in this hobby.
That's what hobby's about, isn't it?
That's exactly what this hobby's about, because that's very important, because that's what ham radio is.
Yeah.
I'm a ham. You're a ham.
Yeah.
We're all, even shortwave listeners, is to embrace the hobby and pass it on. That's why there's Elmers. That's why they're the old timers that are helping the newer generation.
Sure.
If the Elmers weren't there, you're never going to learn.
Excellent. So, is there anything else? Anything else you've been playing with recently, or is there anything else you want to talk about?
Just a lot of L-band. I'm working with LNAs and different patch antennas, and just really embracing this Inmarsat communication. It's just fascinating what you can pick up, and it doesn't have to be an RSP. It can be any SDR as long as you can get up to that frequency. The versatility of the RSP is that it allows me to embrace my love for HF, and now my love for satellite communication, because it.
Okay. So your hobby is growing. You're growing in the hobby.
Correct.
Have you got any ideas what you might be doing next? Anything else piquing your interest?
I can. If I put it out there, then I'm going to have to do it.
Okay. So
I'm working on a controller.
Okay.
That my own personal. I'm into Arduinos and using them to make controllers that control functions in the RSP in SDR Uno.
Okay. Yeah.
So I've been doing that before. There's a video of John and myself taking an old Marconi 100 radio.
Okay.
I made the controls for it, shipped it off to him in the UK, and he retrofitted it to make all the buttons control SDR Uno through a traditional radio. So I want to, on my own, just put it out there, a possible controller for
So
SDR
it's kind
Uno.
of it's kind of making an old style radio, actually the inside of it being SDR Uno. An SDR device.
Basically, it's an external device that will tune and allow you to control the function of SDR
Got it.
Uno. So if
it's
you
a
want to
front
change
panel,
the
basically.
right, if you want to change the mode, you push the button AM, FM, upper sideband, lower sideband, a rotary encoder to change the tune.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. Sounds pretty cool.
Other than that, nothing else that I can think of.
Okay, cool. So, Mike, look, if anyone wants any more information about SDR Play, where does
please
it go?
open up a support ticket, sdrplay.com/support. If you have any questions, comments, criticism, praise, doesn't bother me one bit.
Whereabouts should they send the round trees? What are the sweets called again? The candies?
The randoms.
The randoms. Where do they send those?
Yeah,
SDR Play at Florida.
I have a little bit of an addiction with these sweets from the UK called randoms, where when I come here, I wind up taking cases of them home.
Now, I've got to say, Mike put on Facebook, I think last week, he was heading over to the UK for this event. Please bring randoms. So I've actually brought Mike some randoms. So
well done.
He's a happy guy.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for having me.
That's cool. Right. Thank you very much for your support so far.
My
Let
pleasure.
it continue.
Don't thank me. It's my pleasure.
Okay. And all the best for the future. Thank you.
You as well. Thank you.
Jeez.
I'm with Graham yet again. We enjoy meeting up with Graham because he has some really nice products over here on BHI. So, but you were telling me at the start of this, you're a film star and you kept that one quiet. Go on, Graham. Quadrophenia?
Well, yeah, I wouldn't call myself a film star. I skived off work, having queued up at the Brighton Evening Argus job centre the week before, got a phone call, do you want to be an extra in Quadrophenia? So me and my mates went down on our scooters and I was an extra for 2 days, mixing with the likes of Toya Wilcox, Leslie Ash, Phil Daniels. It was amazing. I think I'm in the film for about 3 seconds running onto the beach.
Yeah, but it's still fun, isn't it? And this is something extra that very few people have known about you, Graham. And it adds a bit of colour, but it's great fun. And I mean, last time we did an interview, we were in Dayton, and we got bombed by Moonraker, didn't we? They just didn't realise we were recording, but it'll be fun.
Yeah, they're good guys, Moonraker.
Yeah, no problems. I mean, most of the people in the hobby are great. But you have some new product. Now, I actually purchased a set of your headphones, the HS1s.
The HP ones.
HP ones. Oh, I've got to get it right, haven't I? HP ones.
Yeah.
And I've got to say, I had them on for 3.5 hours on a plane so I could listen to music and not the screaming kid across the aisle from me. So, 3.5 hours, they're comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, we spent about a year trying to find a pair that were comfortable, and that's the key thing, is they're low-cost headphones. They work across the comms bands, but they're actually very comfortable, which is, when you're listening for quite a long time, it's quite important, no good having an expensive pair that after a short while make your ears hurt. So, that's great. I'm glad you enjoyed them.
Yeah, I thoroughly did. But you've improved them, I believe. You've got a noise-cancelling version now.
Yeah, we found from the same supplier a pair of active noise-cancelling headphones. I don't know if you know, they work very simply by having microphones inside the headphones, and they just reduce the ambient noise. So for when you've got noisy environments like at this Hamfest or on a plane or on a train, you can use the headphones to improve your listening and your audio. It's not in the audio path, it's just on the ambient noise. But yeah, they're going very well. They're retailing at $39.95 at the show. They're called the NCH. Then we're doing a special show price of $29.95, and they're going well.
Yeah, sounds good to me. Sounds really good. So, as I say, new products from you all the time, which is good. Yep. You've got lots of nice things coming. Now, you pointed to your speaker and said there was some new functionality in your speaker, your original looking speaker?
Yeah, BHI was founded in April 2002. I mean, 17 years and more going, but the NES 10.2 speaker was the founding product. It's gone through several changes and we're now on the Mark IV. It's been delayed for nearly 9 months, but finally I've got one here and we'll be getting more stock in a few weeks' time. And essentially, we've improved it by adding the new BHI DSP, which has got improved algorithms on the sort of weak signals, 5 watts audio, the switching's all on the top with the filter level at the back. It's generally an improved product, and it's available now. So we're pleased to finally get it to market and launch it here at the Newark show.
Yeah, well, that's good, and it's nice that you've got a couple of products that you're previewing at the Newark show, because I know that often people think that with Dayton and Friedrichshafen, there's not a lot gets announced after that, but it's nice to have some new stuff to show here.
Yeah, it was sort of timed that way, really. Lucky that we were able to say, these are new products. So the NCH headphones, the noise-cancelling headphones, they're launching today. They're not even on our website, and people are putting them on, pressing the switch, and can't believe how good they are. And we're nearly sold out of those already. So when you buy your pair to add to your HP1s, we'll be laughing.
He's a salesman at heart. Yeah, no, I probably will, but no problems, Graham. Now, I'm going to embarrass the young lady sitting next to you. She's off camera, but you brought your daughter with you today, and it's nice you got some help, because we often see you sort of here on a stand on your own all day, and it must be nice having a bit of company.
Yes, it's nice to have some brains with me. She's just finished a master's in conservation, ecology, and evolution, and she's just about to start a PhD in biosciences. So she's been, when they were younger, they came and helped, and it's great to have someone that you can trust and help you on the stand.
Well, that's good, and congratulations on your qualification. Well, anything else you'd like to tell us before we finish up, Graham?
Not really. I think they're the two key products, the NCH headphones. I think people should check out. If you're travelling and you've got a noisy environment you're working, maybe a station, you're working with lots of people around you, they'll make a big difference when you're listening. And the NES-22 Mark IV, up until when we stopped the Mark III about 9 months ago, that was our best seller over the last 16, 17 years. So we've sort of been lost without it. So getting it back as a Mark IV with improved noise cancelling and bigger amplification and improved circuitry is going to, I think, do well for us.
Well, that's great news. And as always, your website is?
www.bhi-ltd.com.
That's good. So you now know where to find Graham and his products. Thank you very much for your time, Graham.
Thank you very much indeed for you always coming to see me. I appreciate the support you give our business.
Thank you, Graham.
The ICQ Podcast. Come for a moment. Stay for an hour.
Right, it's nice to catch up with Carl here at Hamvention 2019. We saw you earlier in the year with the FTDX101D. Today you have an FTDX101MP on the stand with an internet-connected box that's becoming available soon. So what's the advantages, Carl?
Okay, so the FTDX101MP, unlike the 101D, is now a 200-watt radio. And unlike the D, it has the VC2 unit, the front-end pre-selector unit, available on the main and the sub-receiver as well. It also includes a 300 Hz CW filter on the main band as standard. And it also has a 200-watt PA with a speaker and power supply combination, so you get the higher voltage for the power, for the PA.
So that sounds really, really good. And I know that you, at the moment, appear in number one on the Sherwood engineering report for the 101D. So that can only be better because you've got extra functions on this one.
Yes. Well, performance-wise, they're equally comparable. They've both got high dynamic range and so on, like each other. But of course, having more power just helps that little bit. You're trying to work that DX station.
Certainly does. Now, you mentioned that we also now got Yaesu come up with an internet box. Now, it's not for sale just yet, but fairly soon. And it's not only for the FTDX 101 range, is it?
That's right. We've got a LAN unit, which we hope will be available soon. It connects via Ethernet to perhaps your wireless router or something at home. You then have some remote control software that runs on a Windows PC that you can then connect perhaps via a VPN connection to the LAN box, and you can control your radio from home, or from, like a hotel location or something like that. It connects not only to the 101MP and the 101D, which will give you like the waterfall display, the wide bandwidth waterfall display, and the audio displays, allows you to tune, change modes, change visual appearance and so on. But it also works with some of our other radios. Now, although you won't get the wideband waterfall display on our other radios, you will get like the audio bandwidth scope, you'll be able to remotely control the radio, you'll be able to get the receive audio and the transmit audio, and that works with most of our product range.
So effectively, what you get on the screen is what you see on the across the internet. Effectively, so if your particular radio doesn't do the 3D band scope, as you say, like the 101 range, you ain't going to get it. But it's not a failing of the LAN unit. It's not a failing of the radio. It's just a design feature, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. They don't have the circuitry designed in order to do that, so they don't have it.
So when I was down at Yaesu earlier in the year seeing you, and Mrs. B was saying to me, "Do you want one?" and I started dribbling. I'm glad I waited, because this one's probably the nicer one to go for, isn't it?
Yeah, and having that extra power, I think, helps, especially with band conditions like they are at the moment. Just a little bit more output just helps.
That's very good. That's very good. Okay. Come on, the other price I'm going to get asked is, do you know what the price is at the moment?
They are available now, and they're approximately £4,300.
So £4,300, depending on how much wrestling and arm wrestling you do with your dealer.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, that's a fair price. That's a fair price for them. So all very, very well. Anything else you'd like to tell us before we close the interview? Well, okay. Don't forget, you can find Yaesu on their website. What's Yaesu's UK website?
www.yaesu.co.uk.
There you go. So you heard it from Carl. A lovely piece of kit. Carl, thank you very, very much again. Thank you.
So I'm joined by Mike. Mike's from CEECom. Hi, Mike.
Hi, how you doing? You good?
I'm good, thank you. And I believe this is your first time here at any Hamvention, I think. Any Hamfest, yeah?
It is indeed, yeah, I'm loving it. It's really busy. I'm thoroughly enjoying it, yes.
So your company is CEECom, C-E-E-C-O, is that right?
CEECom, CEECom, yes.
Excellent. You produce?
Antennas.
Okay. Now, it's the first time we've seen you. So tell us the sort of things that you're doing. Tell us the sort of things that you're selling.
Right, so at the show today we've got dipoles and J-poles. We've got J-poles for 2 metre, 4 metre, 6 metre bands and the air band.
Okay, great. And these things you build yourself?
Yes, I've got a moulding machine. I produce them from a very small workshop. They take me a lot of time to make, but it's a hobby turned into a small business. Yeah, that's it really.
So how did you get into this? What's your sort of background? What got you into building aerials and that sort of thing?
Very long story. I won't go into it all today, but I'm into my electronics. From a kid, I've been taking TVs apart, detuning my granddad's radio to listen to Aircraft. It's just a hobby. I like making things. Got into my scanners probably around about the age of 15. Was listening to all sorts. There was a lot more activity back then.
Yeah.
Bought a few aerials, which wasn't up to standard back then, and I just enjoyed making them. Started making a few things, and things have progressed. And here I am today, making.
So what made you go from being a bit of a hobby, building things for yourself, thinking actually I could make it into a business? What was it that made you to do that? What was it?
A few friends of mine in the same hobby would go, "Oh, Mike, can you make me this? Can you make me that?" And I'd make it. And excuse me, as the years have gone by, yeah, people are always asking me to make things. So why not make a business of it?
Absolutely. Now I believe you're still working. You've still got a full time. Are you doing this as a kind of part-time thing?
For now, yes. Hopefully things will progress and I can leave. But yeah, I have a full-time job. I work on telemetry. I install all sorts of things on water towers.
Okay, interesting.
I don't know what they are because we don't get told, but a lot of other stuff involved in the job too. But some of it does involve radio, yes.
Okay, so a little bit to do with your current job, but actually you're kind of getting into this, your own business, which is great.
Yes.
What have you found has sold well, or what were you expecting to find today, and how has it actually gone?
To be honest, it's been amazing today. I've been to a few small rallies, you get people walking around, but driving up on early Friday morning, I got the wife out of bed really early, but driving up we was debating, I don't know if it's going to be busy or not. bought a load of stock up, and to be fair, I've nearly sold out. It's been absolutely an amazing response.
So you're quite pleased, I believe.
I'm patting myself on the back. Yeah, I'm very happy with what we've done today and yesterday.
Now, I've seen you on the stand here last couple of days, and I've seen you've run out of things. You've actually been building aerials around the back there. You've had your toolkit out. You've had things cutting bits of aluminium and things. It's been that busy.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people. Sometimes when you buy an antenna, it comes, it's marked, you put it up, it's not tuned. So I've been showing people, I've got the aerial analysers here, that goes right up to a couple of gigs. So every aerial I've been selling, I've been putting it on the analyser, tuning it, and yeah, it's giving people what they want.
So people are happy? It sounds like people are very happy.
Yeah, I had one guy come back, he was yesterday, took 4 metre J-pole. He went away last night. He was so impressed. He come and took one on 6 metre and 2 metre today as well.
You can't say better than that. And in terms that you mentioned earlier, you got a workshop. It sounds like you've had to invest some money in this. It's not like it's fairly in depth, isn't it?
It is, but the wife's over there, so I don't really want to discuss the amount I've spent. But we're in the thousands. Yeah, the moulds is a lot of money. Getting the moulds machined. The plastic injection machines itself, very pricey.
I hear the moulds are pretty expensive.
So in a few years' time, hopefully I'll break even.
Okay. So every one of these aerials that you're selling today, is a bit of that money going to go back to pay for some of that equipment that you've had to invest in?
Well, the wife's watching, so it's probably going to go on her shoes, because she's been very, very good to me, and she's sat with me all day. But yes, you're absolutely right. It'll pay towards some of that investment.
Excellent. Okay, great. And you mentioned about some of the qualities. I think it's aluminium. Is that mostly aluminium? So we've got one here. Look, actually.
Yeah, so the antennas, they're made out of aluminium. Through the middle, we've got a fiberglass rod to give it the strength. It doesn't need it. It's strong enough as it is. But the rod goes through the middle. That is crimped. These poles are crimped just inside there, hydraulically, onto the fiberglass pole. Then we've got 10 gauge wire, which is soldered onto the connectors. And that is also crimped and soldered onto the elements rather than a flimsy screw. And that's it basically. There's not much to it, but you try snapping one of them and I'll put
I wouldn't try to, but I trust you on that. So it's built to last, and as you say, the injection moulding is for this centrepiece essentially, yeah?
Yes, yeah, it gives it extra strength, waterproof, hides all the electrical connections.
And I see you've got things for amateur and also air bands. Is that the sort of markets that you're going for?
Yeah, we've got all the amateur bands. I'm only selling down to 6 metres at the minute. We've got some 10 metre stuff coming out, and then after Christmas I'm going to focus going a bit lower, all sorts of stuff.
Okay, so you got some future plans then for some new products?
Yes, the next plan at the minute, we're just waiting for the mould for the J-pole to make it collinear. So we've got a U-shape matching section which is adjustable.
And are folks asking you for new things? Are they saying, have you got an HF or something, or have you got a dipole for 20? Is that the sort of thing you're finding people asking for?
Yeah, the J-pole I've sold a lot this year, but everyone's coming back, can we further improve it? So that is why I'm doing the extra bit. The 4 metre band today, as they've sold out. I don't know why it's so busy. But
well, I was saying we chatted a little bit about the 4 metre band. I'm guessing because a lot of the new rigs now, the ICOM 7300, some of the new Kenwood rigs, the new Yaesu FT101D, DX101, now come with 4 metres, and I think it's becoming a more popular band. So I'm actually not surprised people actually want to play with it.
Yeah, I mean, all the 4 metre J-poles have sold today. All of the 4 metre dipoles have sold out, so we're actually cutting down the 6 metres at the minute just to keep people happy. But yeah, we've done well.
That's good. So Mike, if people want to, obviously you're here today at the show. I guess you sell online, do you?
We do. Unfortunately, the website went down yesterday, so I was up all last night. We've put the products back on. There'll be a load more added in a couple of weeks. If you do go online and enter Hamfest 19, that'll give you 10% off everything on there.
Okay, so whereabouts? What's the website address?
It's CEECom, CEECom.co.uk.
Great. So, Mike, thank you very much. Wish you all the best for the future, and we'll obviously again next year.
Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Cheers.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.ICQPodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.ICQPodcast.com.
I'm with Richard from SOTABeams, and got a nice smile on your face, so you must have had a good day, Richard.
I'm absolutely exhausted. It's really been a very busy day for us, yep.
Yeah, and your stand is starting to look a bit bare, and it's only the first day.
Yes, slightly embarrassing. We haven't got anything underneath the tables to fill it up, but we've got one or two things for tomorrow.
Yeah, well, it's always nice when you sell stuff, so that's a good thing. Now, earlier in the year, you sent me a Wolfwave for review, but I believe you now got new software for it, which has added some extra features. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, since you reviewed it, I think we've actually had 2 firmware updates. The latest one adds a binaural CW facility, so basically different tones appear to come from different directions. So that's kind of cool because it means you can use a wider filter on the bands, and rather than using narrow filters for selectivity, you get the signals come from over there and over there. So you can use your brain's ability to determine where sounds come from as the selectivity. So you get a much sort of more immersive sense of the band. And another facility that we've got is we've got some notch filtering. This is for SSB users, and we've got 10 independent notches. So the SSB users can really tailor the passband of their receiver to exactly what they want in the event of any sort of an unforeseen interference.
Well, that sounds good, and I know one of my colleagues, which I showed you original product to, said, it'd be nice if you had a notch filter. So he's got no excuse for not buying one now, has he?
No, not at all. And in fact, that's quite interesting because we're very much led by what people ask us to do. And notch filtering was something that people asked us for, and so we've implemented that. And we've also implemented a left-right balance because some people find that one ear is better than the other. So we've put left-right balance, again, just because people ask us for it.
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, as I say, it's an interesting product. Now, did I, and I may be wrong on this, did I read that it's got Morse code decoding in it, built in on the screen?
Yep, that was another firmware update that I think occurred after you had yours. Yes, so we built a Morse decoder into it. Again, it was something that people asked us for. They said, could it decode Morse? And we said, yeah, sure, it can decode Morse. Then we had to figure out how to actually do it. Actually implementing it was nowhere near as easy as we'd expected. Took a long time, but we've now got a really good Morse decoder built into it as well.
So say it's a great device, and because you can firmware upgrade it, you know, if you've got an original and you firmware upgrade it, you can bring it up to date pretty much right the way through. But do you charge for the upgrades?
No, all the upgrades are absolutely free. It was our initial idea for the product was we wanted a product that didn't become out of date. So we wanted a product that users could give us input and we could actually implement stuff that the users wanted. So that's what we have, and it's all the users benefit from those changes.
Oh, that sounds good. That sounds good. Now, I know we've talked about the Wolfwave, and that's probably a very useful product to have. But you make lots of useful things. I mean, I've certainly used your link dipoles. As a club, we chose to build them as a club project, and we bought a number from you. But you do a lot of other things. Do you want to highlight some of your other products?
It's difficult to think what to highlight. We have over 200 different products, so when we come to a show like this, we only bring kind of a small selection. But we have been working with a manufacturer, a composites manufacturer, on some new masts. So we've got a selection of different masts, which have been quite successful for us. We're actually working on some filtering products now, particularly a 2-meter bandpass filter, a very narrow bandpass filter, which looks to be quite an interesting product. So we hope to bring that to market probably early next year.
Well, actually, and I didn't know about this, but a 2-meter bandpass filter to me sounds very interesting, because most modern radios these days, because we want wideband receive, are as wide as a barn door.
Absolutely.
And if you go to places in my part of the world, Reigate Hill on top of the M25, you're hit by pages. So that if that can cure that sounds like a real good one.
Yep, that's precisely what it's for. It's going to be tiny, and it'll just plug into the antenna socket of your radio. It's a very, very small device, and it's designed to do precisely that thing. We've got a lot of testing to do with it yet. We've had them in the lab. We've had prototypes made. You can't imagine how expensive it is to have a silver helical prototype filter made. But we've had those made. We're testing them at the moment. Next week, I hope to be going out on some big communications sites with all those transmitters on, and let's see how well they work.
Well, that's good news. That's really good news, and interesting to me, and I'm sure our listeners. But as I say, coming to the end of the show, a couple of nice products you've told us about. Guys, you really do need to look and see what Richard sells, because even down to his wire winders, they are absolutely brilliant. You look at them and think, oh, why do I pay this much for a bit of plastic? And then the first time you're out using one, you know why you've paid that much, because it's just so easy.
Brilliant. Okay, that's great. Thanks very much for talking to me.
Yeah, thanks for giving us an interview, Richard, and all the best for the rest of the show.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
I'm joined by Eric from Elecraft. Hi, Eric.
Good morning.
And we saw you back in Dayton about 3 or 4 months ago, and you were debuting the new K4 radio.
Yep.
How are things going with that, Eric?
Oh, fantastic. Of course, what we had at Dayton were some of our first units out of engineering, and we were showing those operating. Now we actually have our full pre-production units going through final test on those. Of course, final software development, which never seems to stop. You're always adding features. But now we're getting ready to ramp up production, and our goal is to get this rolling after the first of the year, hopefully not too far past that, and get them out into the market. We had a phenomenal response at Dayton. We had our biggest sales year ever, actually, at Dayton in terms of new product sold, and the K4 certainly made that happen for us. So it's been an exciting year so far for us.
Excellent. Now you're here on the waters at Stanton, which is obviously your UK distributor.
Yes.
You're obviously working with these guys very closely. What's happening in sort of Europe? I mean, in terms of like the dates for release, that sort of thing, is that still very much on track?
Yes, I think so. In terms of Europe, it'll be because we have to finish CE testing, and that comes from the first actual off-the-line production units. That will delay it about a month to 3 months afterwards. So probably you'll see units showing up in Europe through Waters and Stanton, and of course our other distributors outside of the UK in the March-April timeframe, probably realistically. We also have a large backlog we have to work through, but of course they'll have some early units, so they'll be able to satisfy their customers too.
And I assume if you want to get one of these, get in the queue, get your name on the list, I presume you can talk to yourselves or talk to your local distributor or dealer.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're here in the UK, talk to Waters and Stanton, then they'll take your name down and everything, so that so that helps us. So we obviously know how many to produce and reserve for them before we ship.
That's great. Okay, excellent. And you mentioned that there's been some refinements in the software. Is this just kind of final polishing before you're going to go to production?
Well, final polishing, adding new features. We're planning for a lot of interesting things down the road after we release the radio too that we haven't even announced. We've had customers ask for things like when you have the K4D with diversity reception, the ability to add internal to the radio, the ability to adjust phase and amplitude so you can null out interference from a certain direction, and certainly we're looking at that. And certainly a lot of other fun features that'll be coming out. But overall, the software is coming together very well. We've had these on the air operating. We don't always disclose their K4s on the air I usually say I have a homebrew radio. But it's dangerous if I get on the air. They sort of assume what I'm operating. But other engineers, they're more anonymous. But we've been adding a lot of features, and also in terms of upgradability in the radio, we developed quite a bit in that area too.
That's great. And you mentioned to me earlier before we started to record this very modular radio. It's very future-proof. Maybe we can talk about that.
Well, two pieces. Yeah. First of all, we have the three versions of the radio: the K4, K4D, K4HD. K4 has the ability to listen. All of them have two receivers. K4 basically two receivers off of a single antenna, transmit-receive antenna at one time. Though you can use a separate receive antenna for it. But it's still a single source for the receiver at any one time. If you go to the K4D, now you can have two antennas feeding two analog to digital converters, which gives you the ability to do diversity reception, where you have two antennas on the same frequency, listening one in each ear. And as the signals fade, they fade at different times, and actually, it's like having an extra 6 dB or more of the ability to basically like antenna gain in terms of what you're listening to. You don't lose the signals as often, so you can talk to weaker people, things like that. And the K4HD, of course, adds another module to go to even higher blocking dynamic range. We have roughly 130 dB of blocking dynamic range in the basic K4, K4D, so that's wonderful as it is. And then we can give that little extra bit for the D-expeditions and the multi-contest stations that have multiple people on the same site running a kilowatt or more on the same band. Different bands, that's not an issue. We have very sharp bandpass filters. We have refined the bandpass filters actually for Europe. For instance, our 20-meter filter rolls off quite sharply above the band when you want to use it in amateur mode, so that like the shortwave band just above that, around 19 meters, is blocked quite well. So we've heard that that's caused problems with some other radios. We want to make sure we do that. So we've gone through and refined minor things, adjusting values of the components. But in future-proofing the radio, the key thing we've probably hadn't emphasized early on, we've been talking a lot about now, is like the K3, we have the ability to actually, when we do a hardware change down the road. In some cases, a critical piece of hardware, like in the case of the K3 days, was a lower noise synthesizer we came out with the K3S. And we made that available as a plug-in for people with the existing K3s, and it was a big performance boost for them, so they were able to extend the life on their radios, not have to always go to the next newest model. Well, we've left that back door open also on the K4. The critical component on a direct sampling SDR like the K4 is that analog to digital converter on the front end, and we're running a very fast 122.8 megahertz sampling rate 16-bit A to D converter from analog devices. Great device, but 4 or 5 years down the road, who knows exactly when, either they or one of their competitors, Texas Instruments and so on, will come out with the next fire-breathing, even better linearity, more dynamic range part. And we want to be ready for that. So we built rather than soldering the part directly to the main board, which is true for most all the radios out there except ours, this one's actually a very small plug-in module right next to the DSP, very short path, so there's no penalty for doing this. For both of the two A to Ds that go in for the K4D or a single one in the K4. We come out with that new one, we produce a new module, drop that in there, and surprise, you get the next boost in performance down the road.
Wow, so you're not buying a whole new radio, you just buy little units to go in there, and it's like having you get all the benefits of the new technology.
Absolutely, and of course the software in our radios, which we do not charge for in terms of the upgrades, that will continue to evolve. We'll keep adding features. One thing we do is we listen to customers quite a bit. So I've been writing down in my little iPhone notebook all people talking here, ideas they want to have put into it. And of course the list gets quite long after a while, but we select neat things off of that.
I was going to ask you, so when you come to these sort of trade shows, these shows where you're talking to customers, do you get a lot of feedback? Are you sort of making a big database of things that you might want to add in the future?
Absolutely. We were just talking about that phasing control for the two receivers. That's been a request numerous times, so I think you'll probably see that pop up down the road. I'm not promising it first release, but and that'll just be a new software release, and you load it in and away you go. So we get the ideas like that all the time off the internet, off the discussion groups on the internet. We read a lot of the ones that aren't even the ones we sponsor, the social media groups and so on, and occasionally participate and talk. But on those groups, we obviously the Elecraft email list we're very active on. But continually we're getting ideas, and customers are our best ideas for new features. So we pay attention to that. That's a big part of the company.
Great, Elliot, that's great. Look, I won't take too much of your time. It's been great to see you. Nice to see you here in the UK, and have a great show.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Cheers.
Whether it's across the pond or over the channel, the ICQ podcast is international.
Herzlich willkommen in Deutschland. 73 de España.
By amateurs, for amateurs.
Well, guys, I really hope you enjoyed our feature on UK Hamfest 2019. Certainly, say the new innovations from the smaller companies and, of course, updates from Yaesu and Elecraft. As always, I'd like you to head over to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ICQPodcast, where you can see actually the interviews that we actually recorded at UK Hamfest, and there'll be some more rolling out over the next couple of weeks. I'd like to thank Chris Howard, Mike 0 Tango Charlie Hotel, Frank Howell, Kilo 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel, and Ed Durrant DD5 Lima Papa for taking part in News Roundtable with Martin M1MRB. As always, you can help keep us advert free, just like Anne-Marie did, by visiting ICQPodcast.com/donate, and say whatever you think the value of your show is worth, send it our way, as it helps us pay our way, and keeps us advert free. Now, we normally might be thinking about making sure Mrs. B has a cup of tea and a chocolate biscuit, as we always say at the end of the show, but Mrs. B's actually been with us and many of our listeners at UK Hamfest, and we're off out now, as I say, to get something to eat, and this time it might be a nice dinner for Mrs. B and a glass of wine. Well, look, guys, we're going to do this all again very soon. We normally say a fortnight's time, but with so much content, I'm sure you'll be hearing from us very, very soon. So look after us all and continue to enjoy the heavy, and we'll catch up again very, very soon. 73's all. Bye-bye.